There comes a definitive moment when the exhaustion of chasing people who do not value you finally shatters your illusions. You wake up to the brutal reality that true power is never found in the fleeting opinions of others, but entirely in what you quietly build within yourself. You're not here today to change the world. You're here to trigger the massive internal shift that stops the bleeding of your own energy. The time for seeking approval and trying to fit into spaces where you clearly do not belong is completely over. From this exact second forward, you will move in absolute silence without any need to explain, demonstrate, or justify your existence to anyone else. You have been systematically conditioned since childhood to believe that your worth is strictly tied to how much you produce and how loudly you are applauded by the crowd. This toxic conditioning turns you into an emotional beggar, desperate for scraps of attention from people who barely understand their own minds. You measure your entire existence against an invisible, merciless yardstick handed to you by a society that thrives directly on your insecurity. Instead of recognizing the power you hold, you constantly scan the room, waiting for someone to validate your presence and confirm that you're allowed to take up space. The absolute tragedy is that this endless pursuit of external approval leaves your inner world completely hollow and dangerously fragile. When your core sense of self relies entirely on validation from the outside, you willingly hand over the keys to your emotional and mental stability. Every minor criticism shatters your confidence, and every moment of interpersonal silence feels like a severe condemnation of your character. You slowly become a helpless prisoner within your own mind, trapped in a cell where the guards are the fleeting, uninformed opinions of absolute strangers who do not care about you. The undeniable truth you must accept right now is that your value was permanently cemented long before the world ever had a chance to attach its labels to you. True worth does not require an audience, and it absolutely does not blossom under the blinding spotlight of public approval. You must immediately start recognizing the unbreakable core within you, aggressively building a new reality where your own acceptance is the only metric that dictates your value. You decide right now whether the opinions of others will forever chain you, or if you will rise entirely above them. You look in the mirror every single day and actively choose to focus only on the gaps, the things you have not yet achieved, and the milestones you believe you have missed. You intentionally place your life on an indefinite hold, quietly waiting for someone to arrive and grant you permission to finally feel sufficient. This pathetic waiting game severely paralyzes your human potential, forcing you to completely ignore the fundamental strength that already resides deep within your character. You're treating your life as a rehearsal, waiting for an opening night that will never come unless you claim it. Consider the reality of a seed buried in absolute darkness. From the outside, it appears completely insignificant and powerless. Yet, contained within that tiny shell is the violent, unstoppable force necessary to break through the solid earth and withstand brutal storms. By stubbornly refusing to acknowledge your own hidden resilience, you allow your mind to wither away in the dirt. You have convinced yourself that the darkness surrounding you is a permanent grave, completely failing to realize that it is actually the necessary incubator for your growth. It is time to radically make peace with your history and your deepest wounds, understanding clearly that every brutal experience was architected to bring you to this exact moment. Look at your reflection with cold clarity and accept that while you're actively under construction, you're already entirely whole. You must execute this transformation in absolute silence, completely for yourself, letting the sheer force of your renewed energy speak on your behalf. Your presence will become so undeniable that you will never need to utter a single word to prove your worth again. They sold you a highly sanitized, commercially comfortable version of self-love that only involves superficial rewards and empty positive affirmations. But genuine self-preservation is actually a brutal, silent war waged every single day against the lies you have deeply internalized about your own inadequacy. You were strictly taught how to bleed for others, how to accommodate and please the crowd, while actively abandoning your own critical needs in the shadows. It is a profound betrayal of your own soul, leading to a profound exhaustion that no amount of sleep can ever fix. Your mind is a vast, unmapped ocean, and right now you only allow yourself to exist on the turbulent surface where the storms of daily life dictate your mood. Beneath those violent waves lie your unresolved fears, your hidden traumas, and the vital parts of yourself you have cowardly rejected. As long as you refuse to dive into those crushing depths, you will remain a complete stranger to your own soul, constantly running from your own shadows in terror. You cannot master what you refuse to confront, and your avoidance is slowly killing your potential. True exploration means having the raw, unadulterated courage to sink directly into that darkness, not to unfairly judge the broken pieces, but to finally understand them. It means sitting alone with your deepest flaws and fully accepting your complete nature, embracing both the brilliant light and the suffocating dark. This profound, unflinching acceptance forms an impenetrable armor that no external force or opinion can ever pierce. When you finally embrace the entirety of who you are, the desperate need for external validation simply evaporates. The continuous internal dialogue you maintain inside your head dictates the exact color, temperature, and texture of your actual reality. When you consistently speak to yourself with relentless cruelty, your internal landscape inevitably turns cold, barren, and deeply hostile to any form of growth. You inflict significantly more damage on your own psyche than any external enemy ever could. Simply by allowing toxic, degrading thoughts to run completely unchecked, you have become your own worst adversary, tearing down the walls of your own mind. This harsh, uninterrupted self-judgment isolates you completely, creating a mental environment where you feel constantly under attack by your own thoughts. You foolishly wait for external circumstances to make you feel safe and secure, completely ignoring the massive fact that the destructive call is coming from inside the house. If you do not ruthlessly conquer this negative internal voice, it will continue to systematically sabotage every genuine attempt you make at personal growth and emotional stability. It will keep you chained to a lesser version of yourself, always doubting your capabilities and expecting failure before you even begin. You must take immediate action to actively cultivate noble, fierce, and supportive thoughts about yourself until your mind becomes an impenetrable fortress of serenity. This requires forcefully pausing the relentless daily noise, listening to your inner voice without prejudice, and asking what your soul actually needs today. It starts with the absolute basics of survival. Fiercely prioritizing your sleep, rejecting draining obligations without apology, and ruthlessly protecting your mental peace. You are the sole guardian of your mind. You exist in a modern society that aggressively demonizes solitude, designed to make you feel entirely defective if you're not constantly reachable or constantly surrounded by noise. The moment you finally disconnect, a fabricated sense of intense guilt sets in, convincing you that you're falling behind or missing out on something crucial. You treat your own solitary presence as if it were a punishment, fleeing in panic from the quiet, empty moments where true foundational growth actually occurs. You have been programmed to fear the silence because it is the only place where you're forced to confront the absolute truth about your life and your choices. By treating your life as nothing more than an endless checklist and scrolling mindlessly through screens to avoid your own thoughts, you are rapidly hemorrhaging your most sacred resource, time. You willingly trade hours of potential awareness for cheap, manufactured emotional garbage, leaving your mind violently agitated and entirely incapable of deep focus. You're not just losing a few careless minutes, you're actively losing your profound presence and the total command over your own fleeting existence. Every wasted hour is a piece of your life you can never get back. You must immediately realize that solitude is not a painful affliction. It is the ultimate privilege and the exact sacred ground where you must build your unbreakable kingdom. When you finally strip away the demanding crowd and force yourself to sit with the silence, the turbulent, muddy waters of your mind will clear, allowing you to see the absolute bottom. Step boldly through the initial fear of isolation and violently claim the profound, unshakable freedom that only exists when you are entirely alone and at peace with yourself. Your mind is currently functioning like a violently agitated body of water, constantly whipped into a frenzy by an endless stream of external demands and meaningless noise. You actively seek out distractions because sitting alone with your own unfiltered thoughts feels entirely unbearable to you. Every single time you feel a momentary pang of emptiness, you immediately reach for your devices to drown it out with manufactured chaos. You have become utterly terrified of your own internal silence, treating the calm as if it were a dangerous void. This absolute refusal to sit still means you're never actually present in your own life. You're just physically occupying space while your mind runs entirely on autopilot. By keeping the surface of your mind constantly turbulent, you successfully avoid looking at the murky depths where your real problems reside. But this avoidance is an illusion. The unresolved chaos beneath the surface dictates your every reaction, driving your anxiety to catastrophic levels. You're entirely blind to your own internal reality because you refuse to let the waters settle. To reclaim any shred of sanity, you must force yourself into environments completely devoid of artificial stimulation and deliberately sit through the agonizing discomfort of detoxing from the noise. When you finally allow the violent waters of your mind to calm and the psychological dirt to definitively settle, you gain terrifying but absolutely necessary clarity about who you actually are. This clarity is not something you can buy or borrow. It is aggressively forged in the brutal fires of deliberate, unbroken silence. You must violently conquer the noise within, or the noise will permanently conquer you and dictate your future. You routinely complain that life is moving too fast and that you never have enough time, yet you blindly surrender your most precious resource to an endless glowing screen. You wake up and immediately inject your brain with the toxic highlight reels of absolute strangers, violently hijacking your own dopamine before you have even taken a conscious breath. 2 hours vanish into the void, leaving you mentally paralyzed, emotionally drained, and completely devoid of any real momentum for your day. You are literally bleeding your life away in increments of meaningless seconds. The absolute tragedy here is not merely the loss of clock time, it is the brutal assassination of your present awareness and the absolute surrender of your personal agency. You are intentionally trading the undeniable reality of your own existence for cheap digital garbage that leaves you feeling more empty and isolated than before. This behavioral loop is a deliberate act of self-sabotage, ensuring you never have the energy required to confront the monumental tasks that actually matter. You are playing the role of a passive spectator in the rapidly closing window of your own life. It is time to ruthlessly reclaim the precious hours you have been so recklessly discarding into the black abyss of digital distraction and meaningless scrolling. Start violently protecting your available time as if it were the absolute last remaining oxygen in a rapidly suffocating room, deploying it strictly toward actions that solidify your mental and emotional fortress. Direct this salvaged energy towards solitary reflection, aggressive physical movement, or the silent, methodical construction of your own future empire. If you do not assign a fierce, non-negotiable value to your own time, the world will happily assign it a value of 0. There is a harsh, unavoidable reality you have been actively dodging because it breaks your romanticized view of human connection. Not everyone you meet is meant to stay in your life. You cling desperately to expired relationships, incorrectly believing that your sheer willpower and infinite patience can somehow fix people who are entirely comfortable with their dysfunction. You view your inability to walk away as a badge of honor or deep loyalty, when in truth it is a glaring symptom of your own crippling fear of abandonment. You are anchoring yourself to sinking ships. This refusal to let go forces you to engage in a silent, agonizing war where you constantly shrink yourself to fit into spaces that have long been dead. When you stubbornly remain in toxic environments, you are not being noble. You're actively betraying your own soul and insulting your fundamental right to peace. The people you refuse to leave are casually feeding off your vital energy while you slowly suffocate under the immense weight of their complete apathy. Your loyalty to them is a direct act of treason against yourself. Walking away is not an act of vicious revenge or dramatic bitterness. It is the ultimate silent execution of absolute self-respect and emotional survival. You must actively develop the cold, clinical ability to completely sever ties with anyone who continuously drains your spirit, without ever offering them a single pathetic word of justification. This necessary withdrawal must be executed with brutal surgical precision, calmly and completely removing yourself from the blast zone of their chaos to preserve your own vital life force. Let your permanent, unshakable absence be the absolute only message they ever receive from you again. Imagine yourself as a deeply rooted structure that requires massive amounts of clean energy and open space to properly expand and dominate its environment. Now realize that you're actively allowing emotional parasites to latch onto your foundation, heavily draining your reserves and suffocating your potential for upward growth. These individuals do not attack you openly. They slowly siphon your life force through constant crises, subtle manipulations, and an insatiable demand for your unreciprocated attention. You're financing their emotional instability with your own sanity. You keep pouring your finest energy, your deep empathy, and your precious time into vast emotional black holes, tragically expecting that one day they will finally overflow and give something back. But you are met with nothing except a hollow silence, half-hearted excuses, and a terrifyingly tepid energy that makes you violently question your own worth. You try to rationalize their absolute lack of effort, continuously making excuses for people who would not cross a puddle to save you from drowning. You're slowly dying of thirst while giving away all your water. The only effective countermeasure is to instantly and ruthlessly cut off their emotional supply without a shred of hesitation or guilt. You must aggressively starve the parasites by redirecting every single ounce of your energy back into your own structural integrity and personal expansion. Do not argue, do not explain your sudden withdrawal, and absolutely do not fall for their desperate attempts to pull you back into the dirt. Reclaim your vital resources and watch them quickly scramble to find another willing victim. You have spent entirely too much of your life aggressively forcing your presence into rooms and relationships where you're barely even tolerated, let alone celebrated. You exhaust yourself performing desperate acts of compliance, hoping to suddenly magically earn the basic human respect that should have been present from the very beginning. This pathetic begging for a seat at a table that does not want you is the ultimate degradation of your own inherent value. You are deliberately making yourself small just to make others comfortable with your existence. Understand this absolute law of human dynamics. Genuine affection, deep respect, and true loyalty cannot ever be negotiated, forced, or extracted through sheer effort. When you constantly have to aggressively fight for someone's bare minimum attention, you have already definitively lost the war and surrendered your dignity in the process. The excruciating pain of unrequited effort is a clear, undeniable signal that you have vastly outgrown your current environment and the people within it. Continuing to push against a locked door only leaves you battered and completely exhausted. It is time to forcefully retract your energy from these dead zones and boldly reclaim the space that belongs entirely to you. You must become completely immune to the devastating fear of being entirely misunderstood or completely left out by people who never truly saw your value anyway. Build your own table in the profound silence of your solitude, reserving seats strictly for those whose actions demonstrate unquestionable respect for your presence. Take back your power and unconditionally refuse to ever audition for a place in someone else's life again. You have been sold a completely fabricated version of freedom, one measured entirely by financial accumulation, passport stamps, and the sheer volume of people surrounding you. But true, unadulterated freedom has absolutely nothing to do with external metrics. It is born the exact moment you become entirely sufficient for yourself. It is the profound realization that you no longer depend on the fleeting emotional validation of the crowd to justify your own existence. When you stop demanding that the world applaud your basic survival, you unlock a terrifyingly powerful level of psychological independence. Deep within your psychological architecture lies an infinite reservoir of strength that you have systematically ignored in favor of seeking cheap external fixes. By constantly looking outward for comfort, you have allowed your internal mechanisms of resilience to atrophy and rust. You must aggressively pivot your focus inward, tapping into that buried source of consciousness and raw power to sustain yourself when the world inevitably shakes you. You're the only permanent resident of your mind, and you must learn to rely solely on the resources you generate internally. The moment you establish this absolute self-reliance, you immediately strip everyone else of the power to destroy your peace. You no longer walk into rooms hoping to be chosen, you walk in knowing that you have already chosen yourself. You start interacting with the world entirely from a position of overflowing abundance rather than desperate, clinging starvation. You choose to love, to share, and to connect, not because you desperately need to fill a gaping void, but because you consciously decide to expand your already complete empire. Consider the immense silent power of a towering lighthouse stationed at the very edge of a violent, unforgiving ocean. It is continuously battered by brutal winds and surrounded by absolute darkness, yet its core remains completely undisturbed and its light never wavers. It does not pause to seek the approval of the ships it guides, nor does it care if the waters are calm or furious. It simply exists to fulfill its singular purpose, to stand incredibly firm and cast its light. You must become this unshakable structure in the center of your own chaotic reality. Think about the countless days you have completely exhausted yourself by giving far more energy than you ever received in return. You extended your absolute best efforts, offered unwavering support, and when the time came for you to lean on them, you were met with a devastating, hollow silence. This unreciprocated sacrifice leaves you feeling worthless, desperately asking what is fundamentally wrong with you. You must realize right now that your internal peace cannot be treated as a disposable toy left in the careless hands of apathetic spectators. True power is the absolute dominion over your own internal reactions, rendering you completely immune to the fickle behavior of others. It means possessing the profound ability to sit alone in an empty room without feeling a single ounce of hollow desperation. It means receiving a harsh rejection and letting it bounce off your armor without leaving a single crack in your identity. When you become your own most fierce and loyal ally, you transform into an immovable anchor, completely impervious to the chaotic storms of human unpredictability. The word no is arguably the most fiercely protective, psychologically powerful boundary you can ever deploy, yet you treat it as if it were a foul curse. You have falsely equated saying no with being arrogant or entirely selfish, when in reality it is the purest form of vital self-care. It requires an immense amount of quiet courage to firmly protect your own energy and explicitly signal to the world that your peace is not up for negotiation. Refusing to participate in things that drain you is the foundational step in reclaiming your fundamental dignity. You know the agonizing script perfectly. An invitation is extended, your body screams for rest, but an overwhelming toxic guilt forces you to say yes. You physically show up to environments you absolutely despise, wearing a tightly forced smile, simply because you're terrified of disappointing people who do not actually care about your well-being. Every single time you execute this miserable performance, you are explicitly telling your subconscious that everyone else's mild convenience is vastly more important than your own mental survival. The moment you finally start wielding the word no as a definitive weapon of self-preservation, a radical shift occurs in your reality. You immediately filter out the leeches who only valued you for your total compliance, and you begin to hoard your precious energy for the monumental tasks that actually matter. You must start building an impenetrable temple around your time, violently guarding the gates and strictly controlling who and what is allowed to enter. Learning to say no to the noise is the exact mechanism by which you finally say yes to your own life. There is a severe, debilitating sickness deeply ingrained in your behavior, the pathological need to act as a universal people-pleaser. You have tragically confused being a genuinely good person with being a spineless, emotional doormat for everyone to wipe their muddy feet on. You operate under the delusional belief that if you just accommodate enough demands, you will eventually earn a permanent state of safety and universal love. Instead, you guarantee your own enslavement, slowly transforming into a hollow puppet completely controlled by the erratic desires of the crowd. This constant agonizing contortion to fit into everyone else's expectations does not just exhaust you, it systematically assassinates your true identity. Every single time you swallow your real opinion or suppress your genuine needs just to keep the artificial peace, a vital piece of your authentic self violently dies. You have morphed into a shapeless reflection of whoever happens to be standing in front of you, entirely forgetting what you actually stand for when you are completely alone. You are trading your soul for the illusion of harmony. The brutal awakening you must face is that the people you are desperately trying to appease do not actually respect you. They merely enjoy the extreme convenience of your lack of boundaries. You must violently tear down the architecture of the people-pleaser and replace it with a spine of absolute steel. Start actively making people uncomfortable by prioritizing your own requirements and refusing to apologize for your own existence. It is vastly superior to be fiercely respected for your iron boundaries than to be cheaply liked for your pathetic compliance. Executing a true boundary is a profoundly silent act of defiance. It does not require a dramatic announcement, a desperate argument, or a carefully worded apology. You must stop feeling the pathetic urge to over-explain your absence to people who are actively profiting from your exhaustion. When you finally decide that a situation or a person is actively degrading your internal peace, your only responsibility is to immediately and quietly remove their access to your life. Your silence and your absence are the absolute most powerful responses you possess. Be entirely prepared for the immediate vicious backlash that occurs the exact second you stop serving as their reliable emotional supply. They will attempt to weaponize guilt against you, labeling you as selfish, cold, and radically changed simply because you stopped lighting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Let them drown in their own manufactured outrage while you sit completely unbothered behind the impenetrable walls of your new boundaries. Their extreme discomfort with your newfound strength is their absolute problem to solve, not yours. Do not ever harbor a single ounce of fear about deeply disappointing other people if preventing their disappointment requires the ultimate betrayal of yourself. The profound, unshakable peace that instantly rushes in to fill the void left by their absence will be all the validation you ever need. You are meticulously constructing an internal environment where absolutely nothing toxic is permitted to cross the threshold. By standing firm in your silent defiance, you reclaim total sovereignty over your energy, your time, and the ultimate trajectory of your entire life. You have ruthlessly separated your physical existence from your psychological state, treating your body like an unfeeling machine designed only to carry your stressed mind from one crisis to another. You demand peak mental performance, absolute focus, and endless emotional resilience, yet you actively deprive your biological vessel of the fundamental rest and nourishment it desperately requires to function. This aggressive disconnect is not a badge of modern hustle. It is a profound failure to respect the only permanent home your consciousness will ever know. When you systematically ignore your physical degradation, the psychological consequences are immediate and utterly devastating. The unexplainable anxiety, the crushing brain fog, and the sudden inability to handle minor inconveniences are not mysterious curses. They are the desperate warning alarms of a biological system in total collapse. You cannot constantly poison your foundation with sleep deprivation and stress, and then act surprised when the walls of your mental fortress begin to violently cave in. You are actively architecting your own physical and emotional ruin. It is time to radically redefine physical self-care, not as a superficial vanity metric, but as an absolute non-negotiable act of psychological survival. You must begin to fiercely protect the integrity of your biological machine, understanding that treating your body with immense respect is the first true step in treating your mind with the same dignity. Sleep, movement, and silence are not luxurious indulgences. They are the critical armor you must put on every single day to withstand the relentless friction of human existence. Imagine a master archer preparing for a critical shot. Your physical body is the solid wooden bow, your psychological intent is the sharpened arrow, and your life's purpose is the distant target. If the bow is heavily fractured, neglected, or strung with weak tension, it absolutely does not matter how perfectly crafted the arrow is or how flawlessly you aim. The shot will violently fail, dropping lifelessly to the ground because the fundamental mechanism of delivery was completely compromised from the start. You're currently trying to fire arrows from a broken bow. You arrogantly believe you can continuously show up for your family, your career, and your future while being completely hollow and fundamentally shattered on the inside. You cannot be a strong, load-bearing pillar for the people around you if your own structural integrity is rotting away from severe internal neglect. Every time you attempt to pour vital energy into others from a vessel that has been completely empty for years, you breed a toxic, silent resentment within yourself. You're failing others precisely because you're completely failing yourself. Stop attempting to conquer the world until you have definitively conquered the discipline of your own internal maintenance. You must aggressively tune your instrument, repairing the fractures in your bow with deliberate rest, fierce boundaries, and unapologetic isolation when required. When your physical and mental faculties finally operate in brutal, synchronized harmony, the sheer force of your forward momentum becomes entirely unstoppable. You will strike your targets not through desperate, frantic effort, but through calm, calibrated power. You look strictly at your own reflection and feel a deep, agonizing disgust for the visible and invisible scars you have accumulated over the years. You view your past mistakes, your failed relationships, and your moments of profound weakness as permanent stains on your character that must be desperately hidden from the world. You waste catastrophic amounts of energy carefully curating an illusion of unbroken perfection, terrified that if anyone saw the deep cracks in your foundation, they would immediately abandon you. You're a prisoner to your own history. This exhaustive obsession with concealing your damage isolates you in a terrifyingly quiet hell, where you're completely surrounded by people but intimately known by absolutely no one. When you operate entirely from a place of hiding, every interaction becomes a high-stakes performance, leaving you perpetually exhausted and deeply paranoid. You deny yourself the most fundamental human need for authentic connection, because connection requires the raw, terrifying exposure of the very wounds you swear to protect. Your pursuit of an immaculate image is actively starving your soul. You must radically shift your perception and realize that your fractures do not diminish your inherent value. They are the undeniable physical proof that you survived the impact. Instead of desperately painting over the cracks to look perfectly mass-produced, you must fill them with the solid gold of your hard-earned wisdom. The most formidable, unbreakable structures are the ones that have been shattered and meticulously rebuilt to be infinitely stronger than their original form. Wear your psychological scars as absolute proof of your resilience, not as evidence of your defeat. Society has effectively trained you to wear a heavily reinforced mask, demanding that you smile through crushing pain and politely nod, while your internal world is burning to ash. You have become so incredibly skilled at playing the character of the strong, unbothered person that you have completely forgotten what your own face looks like beneath the suffocating plastic. You are terrified of dropping this heavy armor because you falsely believe that your vulnerability will immediately be weaponized against you by a merciless crowd. The ultimate irony is that everyone around you is quietly suffocating beneath their own heavy masks, desperately waiting for someone brave enough to shatter the illusion first. By refusing to admit when you're fundamentally broken, lost, or completely exhausted, you perpetuate a toxic cycle of collective isolation where everyone silently bleeds to death while pretending to be fine. True, unshakable loyalty and deep human respect are never born in the sterile environment of forced perfection. They are exclusively forged in the messy, brutal trenches of shared reality. The most terrifying, yet liberating action you can ever take is to forcefully rip off the mask and let the world see you in your raw, unedited, and highly imperfect state. It is the radical, unapologetic declaration that you are indeed damaged. You are still actively bleeding, but you are still fiercely standing your ground. When you drop the exhausting performance, you instantly filter out the superficial spectators and draw in the few rare individuals who possess the strength to stand with you in the absolute truth. You have an incredibly destructive habit of weaponizing your past failures, constantly using your own memory as a brutal whip to lash yourself for decisions you cannot possibly undo. You keep yourself locked in a dark, miserable cycle of endless self-reproach, incorrectly believing that if you just punish yourself hard enough, it will somehow alter the timeline of your regrets. This relentless self-flagellation does absolutely nothing to fix the past. It only guarantees that your present and your future are poisoned by the exact same toxic guilt. You must brutally accept the reality that you were never put on this earth to be an immaculate, flawless entity, devoid of horrific misjudgments or painful errors. Your mistakes are not life sentences meant to keep you permanently trapped in a cage of shame. They are the brutal, highly effective instructors required to forge your ultimate character. If you're experiencing intense internal pain from a past error, it simply means your consciousness is actively upgrading. To remain paralyzed by guilt is to blatantly reject the vital lesson your pain is trying to teach you. Stop desperately trying to erase your messy history and start ruthlessly using the wreckage of your past as the heavy stones to build the foundation of your new empire. You are not a ruined artifact. You are a massive, imposing masterpiece currently in the violent stages of its own creation. When you completely surrender the pathetic need to appear flawless, you gain access to an overwhelming, infinite source of internal peace. Walk forward completely unbothered, fully armed with the heavy truths of your past, and entirely immune to the judgment of the world. The absolute truth is that your continuous suffering is a direct result of waiting for the world to grant you the power you already possess. You have systematically learned how the dangerous illusion of validation keeps you chained, and exactly how the brutal execution of your own boundaries can instantly set you free. The time for bleeding your energy into dead spaces is permanently over. It is time to stand firm in your silence, armor your mind, and become the unshakable force you were meant to be. If this raw truth shattered your illusions today, subscribe immediately, and let's continue building an unbreakable mind together.